What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Gage. Welcome to the channel. Today, I am excited to present my Spellcaster deck from all the way back in the 2005 era of the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG GOAT format. This is one of the very first legal formats that is recognized for the American side of the TCG, and I decided to show off something a bit different today. So I am excited to hop into the profile, but before I do, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're fans of content like this. So without further ado, let's just hop right into it. So you can't play a deck that has a bunch of lights and darks like Spellcasters without playing the premier boss monster of the format in Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, who is just an absolute house. It is one of the most powerful cards in the format by far, and you have to play it if your deck can afford to do so. It is able to special summon itself by banishing a light and dark from the graveyard, and it can either target a monster on the field and banish it. It can't attack during the turn it does that, but that's just an extremely powerful effect since cards that banish are at a premium in this format. And then if it does attack, if this attacks a monster and kills it by battle, it has the ability to attack a second time, which is just absurd. The fact that it's 3,000 attack means that most of the time, nobody is going to be attacking over this. So the minute you put this into play, it is putting immense pressure on your opponent, and your opponent is going to have to use some of their cards like Mirror Force, Torrential, and the like to be able to get rid of this as soon as possible. If you're able to establish lights and darks very quickly, that means you have a greater likelihood of being able to get into your Blackluster Soldier. And yeah, this is just an incredible card to top deck if you just, in the late game, if you just so happen to be low on card advantage. And yeah, I feel like the namesake of the format in GOAT format, Blackluster Soldier, I would say, is definitely the face of the format for sure. So, yep, we're playing the singular copy. And then, of course, to go along with it, not as powerful as Blackluster Soldier, but Chaos Sorcerer being another Chaos monster that is able to, special summon itself to the field by banishing a light and a dark monster. And it does have the ability where once per turn, you can just straight up banish a monster on the field. It does not gain that secondary ability that Blackluster Soldier has, where it can attack twice. But again, banishing is at a premium in this format. Most of the time, if you do end up banishing things, there are very few cards that are able to interact with cards that are banished. So essentially, that card is just removed from the game. So yeah, Chaos Sorcerer, we're playing a lot of lights and darks because it just so happens there's a lot of really good light and dark monsters that are also Spellcaster. So yeah, Chaos Sorcerer, while not as strong as a Blackluster Soldier, is still a welcome addition to the deck. And then I am playing 3 copies of Skilled Dark Magician. Now, as a heads up, we are not playing the Dark Magician, though you absolutely have the ability to do so. I have just found that more oftentimes than not, as cool as the Dark Magician is, he is a brick. We really don't want to end up drawing into him. We would really just rather draw other cards that are live. However, Skilled Dark Magician is still just a very solid card. Very underrated, in my opinion. A dark monster that is a spellcaster that is also 1900 attack, which is just very beefy, especially in this format. He's going to be able to attack over a lot of things, and we are playing spell cards that are able to, and other cards that are able to bolster the strength of the Skilled Dark Magician to make it even much more of a threat than it already is. So yeah, you can absolutely choose to play the one copy of Dark Magician if you wanted to go more Dark Magician centric, but just for the sake of trying to make the deck as consistent as possible, I am playing the 3 Skilled Dark Magician. And of course, I'm also playing Mahavilo, which is just a fantastic light monster in this format. It's got 1550 attack, which admittedly is an awkward stat line. And its ability essentially says that if you do have an equipped card that would bolster this attack, then it would also gain 500 attack on top of that. So, for example, if I end up attaching something like a Mage Power, which we'll talk a little bit about later on in the video, say if it's just the Mage Power and no other spells and traps in play, you could equip that Mage Power, which would gain the Mahavilo 500, and then its ability would give it an additional 500, making it so now that its attack will be 2550, which is just very powerful in this format. This is really we're trying to build the deck to also have aggressive plays for when you have the opportunity to start going in on your opponent if you see that they are lacking some set cards on their field, or maybe just an open field where there's no monsters. Mahavilo, your opponent has to respect it, because once it starts to get going and it gets a lot of equipped cards attached to it, that is going to start chipping away at their life points very, very quickly. So people have to respect it, and the fact that it's a light monster means that it also fuels our chaos monsters. So Mahavilo is just a fantastic card, and I have a lot of fun playing with it. So yeah, I'm maxing out on 3 copies. And then I'm also playing the 3 copies of Apprentice Magician, which is a very solid card in my opinion. It's a recruiter in that if it is destroyed by battle, you could special summon a level 2 or lower spellcaster from the deck in face down defense position. So you could either continue to special summon other copies of itself, or you could special summon some other cards that I'm going to be going over, like the Magician of Faith or the Old Vindictive Magician. And those are just fantastic spellcasters that you can get off of his effect. So yeah, the Apprentice Magician allows you to be able to play the deck a little bit more defensively if you do need to, start piling on and accruing resources before choosing to go into your opponent with some of your more aggressive plays. So that's why I do like playing the Apprentice Magician package. I feel like it is very underrated in GOAT format as a whole. So for the Apprentice Magician targets, it goes without saying that if we're playing the Apprentice Magician, then we're playing the Magician of Faith. It has a very simple effect where once it's flipped, you can target a spell in your graveyard and add it to your hand. So we are playing, of course, very powerful spell cards in this format, such as the Graceful Charity, as well as Pot of Greed, right? So the fact that the Magician of Faith gives you the ability to be able to recycle those very powerful spell cards is just absolutely busted. If your opponent doesn't end up dealing with this by using like a Nobleman of Crossout or just trying to kill it by battle, yeah, they'll still give you the one ad from it, but they have to get rid of this, because if not, we are playing other cards that are able to reset to put it back in face down defense position, so that you can continue to abuse the Magician of Faith over and over again, getting you so much card advantage that eventually you will just be able to steamroll your opponent. So 2 copies of Magician of Faith is fine, especially since we are going to be able to special summon it most of the time off of the Apprentice Magician. And if it does just so happen to get knocked, it is not that much of a detriment to us, because yeah, if they end up getting the 1, it means that if we get knocked, we're really only losing 2 cards from the deck as 1 card from the deck, as opposed to losing 2 cards from the deck. So I do like the 2 ratio. And again, it's only as good as the things it can actually grab back, right? Like, say it's early on in the game and you really didn't end up using any of your power spells. Well, then the Magician of Faith is just kind of sitting there dead in your hand. So the 2 copies works just for me, but I could see an argument for 3 for sure. And then, as I alluded to earlier, we are playing the 2 Old Vindictive Magician, just in terms of spellcasters that are special summonable off of your Apprentice Magician. This is just a very good one at being able to deal with established threats. Simply flip, target a monster your opponent controls, and destroy it. So similarly, we have the ability to continue to abuse his ability by being able to reset it with things like Book of Moon, right? So your opponent does have to deal with this, whether they like to or not. A lot of the times it puts them in an awkward scenario where they're going to have to attack into it, especially if they know that you set it off of the Apprentice Magician, because you do have to show what you set off of that. So yeah, Old Vindictive Magician is very powerful. Just being able to deal with your opponent's monsters, just flip, all right, cool, I'm going to get rid of your Blackluster Soldier, is just very powerful to have in this format. And we are also playing 2 copies of Tsukuyomi. So as I mentioned, we are playing different ways to be able to reset our flip monsters, and Tsukuyomi is just one of the more powerful ones to do so, because on any type of summon, you are able to put 1 monster on the field into face down defense position. That includes your own as well as your opponent's. So I love the versatility that Tsukuyomi provides, especially for this deck, because yeah, you can use it to be able to get rid of, to flip down your opponent's threats. Say they have an established monster on their side of the field, then you could just go ahead and put it in face down defense position, and you don't have to worry about it. A lot of the time in GOAT format, the defensive monsters are going to be lower than their attack. Obviously, there's many exceptions to that, but for the strong monsters that are usually going to be doing attacking, their defense is going to be lower. So Tsukiyomi is usually going to give you the opportunity to be able to put something in defense so that you can go ahead and attack into it. But of course, it is also useful for being able to reset your Magician of Faith as well as your old Vindictive Magician so that you can go ahead and continue to abuse their powers. So at the end of the turn, of course, if this is face up on the field, because it's a spirit monster, it will end up going back to your hand, meaning that you can continue to reuse it over and over again. So yeah, 2 copies of Tsukiyomi is fantastic. Once you start to get to the loop where you are just continuously setting the powerful monsters that you have on your side of the field, usually that spells game for your opponent because they just cannot handle the amount of advantage you're going to be generating from that. And then, just for fun, because it's a spellcaster deck, I am playing Injection Fairy Lily. It has a simple effect where once per battle, during damage calculation, if it battles, you can quick effect pay 2,000 life points, and it gains 3,000 attack during that damage calculation only. Like I mentioned, I just have many different options for being able to go aggressive. We're playing different things that can buff the attack as well. So yeah, there are going to be times where you can just simply, if your opponent is low on health, you can go into the Injection Fairy Lily, and if you see that you have the opportunity to do so, you can pay that life points, which in this format is a hefty amount of life points, but if it means that it's able to swing for game, then it doesn't matter how much life points you play, right? Being able to have the ability to attack over something like a Blackluster Soldier and some of the other very powerful attackers in the format is also just good to have in a pinch. The only reason that Injection Fairy Lily could very easily be swapped out with something else is because of the fact that it's an Earth, so it does not have synergy with your Chaos monsters. So that's the only downside, but it's a Spellcaster-based deck, right? So I really did try to play as many Spellcasters only in this deck, and so that's why I am playing the 1 copy. And of course, you can't have a Spellcaster deck, or any GOAT deck for that matter, without 1 copy of Breaker the Magical Warrior. On normal summon, put a spell counter on it, and then you could remove, and it gains 300 attack when it has that spell counter. But you could also remove it to target a spell or trap on the field and destroy it. So a lot of the time, you're going to end up utilizing this ability to be able to just act as an additional Mystical Space Typhoon, just to be able to get rid of your opponent's back row. But sometimes, if it calls for it, you could also leave the spell counter on it and just have a 1900 attack Breaker the Magical Warrior, which is just a very good stat line in this format. So yeah, Breaker the Magical Warrior, it is a staple in most GOAT decks, and that's why you have to play it, especially in a Spellcaster deck. And for the last monster that is mostly as utility, it is not a Spellcaster, but DD Warrior Lady is just an amazing card. It is a light monster, so it does have synergy with the Chaos monsters, and after damage calculation, when this battles an opponent's monster, you can banish that monster and banish this card as well. So this is good in a pinch. Like I mentioned, banishing effects are at a premium, so we really want to be able to max out on cards that have the ability to do so. So DD Warrior Lady is just a really good tech, even though it is not necessarily a spellcaster. So that is it for the monsters. Now to quickly go over the spell cards. Of course, we are playing the 1 copy of Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity. You could technically play the third card in Delinquent Duo. I have a copy, but a lot of the GOAT decks that I am playing and building, in addition to my main one, are mostly going to be played with friends casually, with family casually. So I am not throwing in the Delinquent Duo just because I do find that card in a casual setting does just so happen to be pretty broken. I mean, it's broken in general, but it's not really the best card to be able to play against, right? So Pot of Greed and Graceful, though, are an exception. Yeah, they're still powerful, but they are fun to play. So being able to draw 2 cards or draw 3 and discard 2. Again, we're playing a Spellcaster deck, and we have the ability to constantly add these back with the Magician of Faith. So yeah, we do still want to be able to play really good spells, and these just so happen to be 2 of the best ones. But of course, if you did want to be able to use this to be able to play competitively or things of that nature, then yeah, I would recommend 1 copy of Delinquent Duo for sure. And I am playing 1 copy of Swords of Revealing Light. Just being able to stall for 3 turns potentially means 3 additional draws, right? I mean, if your opponent is not able to deal with the swords, a lot of the time that means that they are just watching you draw cards each of those turns, and that can sometimes buy you the time necessary to be able to get you back into the game. So I do feel like Swords of Revealing Light is very underrated in GOAT format, and yeah, this could be something that buys you time in a pinch. If you need to continue to stall, you can continue to add it back off of the Magician of Faith. with every card that you're playing, you have to think, all right, is this going to be beneficial to me if I need to be able to add it back in a pinch? And Swords is absolutely useful. Say your opponent ends up using their one copy of Mystical Space Typhoon. Well, if you add it back off the Magician, now all of a sudden you have it back, and now you can stall for another 3 turns. So Swords at being able to prevent battle damage to your monsters, and being able to prevent battle to your monsters or to your life points is fantastic in a format that is as slow as this. So I play the 1 copy. And then, as I alluded to earlier, we are playing the Mage Power. The equipped monster gains 500 attack and defense for each spell and trap you control, so just by itself, it's 500. But if you just so happen to have another set trap, or another set spell, or another spell on the field, then you are going to continue to increase 500 for each of those other cards. So yeah, I mean, you really just want to be able to max out on the really good spell cards, and because we're playing Maha Vilo, we definitely want at least one of an equipped spell that we can use to bolster its attack. So 1 Mage Power just so happens to be a sweet spot for me. I'm playing 1 Nobleman of Crossout, which is just a very good tech to have in this format, especially since you're playing the Tsukuyomis to put your opponent's monsters in face-down defense position. Just having the ability to target one of their set cards and banish it is just incredible. If it just so happens to be a flip, then you would have to banish all of the other cards in their deck that just so happen to have that same name. It does end up meaning that you would have to banish your own cards, but in being able to prevent your opponent from utilizing that ability, it does end up meaning that it puts you in an advantage, because now they set their card. Yeah, you ended up losing cards with the same name if you just so happen to be also playing them. For example, if you do end up banishing your opponent's Magician of Faith, then you would have to banish your own instead. But the value in being able to prevent your opponent from being able to utilize it is just as good. So Nobleman is good to have because of the fact that you don't necessarily have to use it for flips. I mean, you know, you book your opponent's Black Luster Soldier, Nobleman it, and boom, banish, gone. Don't have to worry about it no more. And I'm playing the 1 Premature Burial, being able to pay 800, target a monster in the grave, special summon it in attack position. It is just good for, you know, if it just so happens that you get rid of one of your monsters, your opponent is able to get rid of one of your monsters. All right, great. You just go ahead and premature it back and then continue your aggression. That's the thing about this deck, is that you are going to be doing a lot of damage. So the fact that you can premature your monster back is something that your opponent always has to take into consideration. I'm playing 1 copy of Heavy Storm. In this format, there's lots of good spell and traps, so you have to be able to know that you have the ability to just wipe the field in a pinch. I'm playing 2 copies of Book of Moon. We are playing a lot of flip monsters that just so happen to have very, very good advantages if they are consistently reset. So you could either use this similarly with Tsukuyomi to be able to book one of your opponent's monsters face down, or reset your own spellcasters. I'm playing 1 copy of Smashing Ground to just be able to deal with a threat. There are a lot of times where I'm like, yeah, I could use other cards to be able to deal with this monster, but I could just go ahead and 1-for-1 trade. It's just a very solid card to be able to deal with some sticky threats. 1 Mystical Space Typhoon, it is at 1. It is just a fantastic card to have, being able to just target a spell or trap on the field and destroy it. This is one of those cards where you... it really does distinguish if whether or not you, what type of player you are, because you have to be careful. If you do just decide to blind MST something, yeah, sometimes you're going to be able to hit like a Torrential or a Mirror Force, but you could also end up hitting something like a Jar of Greed, right? Which is just so happens to be a card that is seeing more popularity in GOAT format. So Mystical Space Typhoon is one of those cards that, because you're only playing 1, in this deck in particular, you can add it back if necessary, but you do have to be careful about how and when you use it. And 1 copy of Snatch Steel, which is just a god card in this format. Just straight up being able to take control of one of your opponent's monsters is just broken. And so, yeah, the fact that this deck has the ability to add spells back means that you can consistently take your opponent's monsters. So Snatch Steel is a welcome addition. And that's it for the spells. So as you saw, I was really only playing the 1 Mage Power for my equip spell of choice. However, I am also playing 3 copies of Blast with Chain, which as soon as you flip this, it is treated as an equip card, which when paired with your Maha Vilo does end up triggering its ability, and I like the fact that this is a battle trick. Your opponent usually doesn't end up seeing it coming, and it has a secondary effect where if this is destroyed, you could select a card on the field and destroy it. So your opponent does have to be careful about blind MSTing your spell and traps, because now they have to be worried about a bomb that could be in the literal bomb in this instance, that could be in your back row, and it could be very dangerous for them to be able to do that, because if they do have an established monster, or they have a very powerful spell or trap that they have set, then yeah, you could end up destroying it with the Blastwith Chain. But the fact that it has the ability to increase during the damage step is just a very powerful ability to have in GOAT format, and paired with Mahavilo is just fantastic. So yeah, it's a trap, so it can't be reset off of the Magician of Faith, unfortunately, but I just love cards with added utility. I could consider playing United We Stand, or even more copies of the Mage Power, which is perfectly fine, especially since it has additional utility with the Magician of Faith. But like I said, I like that this has two different abilities, and both of them are just so happen to be very good. So I do recommend trying the 3 Blastwith Chain. 1 Call of the Haunted to be able to revive your monsters from the grave. As I mentioned with Premature Burial, that's just very good to have. Torrential Tribute as well as Mirror Force are your equalizers, just making sure that you are keeping your opponent off of having too many monsters on the field, or if they just so happen to be attacking with a lot of monsters and they leave them in attack position, then yeah, that's going to be rough for sure. I personally think Torrential is a little bit better just because it's a little harder to play around. Yeah, you could choose to not summon monsters, but at the end of the day, if your opponent doesn't have any, no matter what, you're going to be at least trading with the Torrential. Whereas with your, when it comes to the Mirror Force, because it is only destroying attack position monsters, your opponent can choose to leave some of their monsters in defense position so that they are not completely blown out by the Mirror Force. So while they are both very, very strong cards, you really just have to play them for the threat, right? Like, your opponent always has to be able to respect them, whether or not you're playing them or not, and they can end up swinging things in your favor in a pinch. So Torrential and Mirror Force are fantastic cards for any GOAT deck. 1 Ring of Destruction, which in this format is just insane, being able to just basically target a monster on the field, and then you would destroy it, and then inflict damage equal to its attack to both you and your opponent, and it would be simultaneous in GOAT format. They've since errated it so that it no longer has that ability, but essentially this is one of the things that can make it so that you could just straight up, either if you're ahead in life points and you see that you have a monster on your end, or if your opponent has a monster on their end that just so happens to have attack that's higher than their current life points, Ring immediately will be able to win you the game if you're able to successfully activate it. Or you can force your duel into a draw. This is one of the very few cards in the game that has the ability to do so, and so I think that's why they ended up errating it, because Konami doesn't really like when they see that there's a lot of cards in the game that have the ability to force a draw. So yeah, Ring of Destruction, it is one of the most powerful cards in the format for sure, so you do have to still play the 1 copy, and I am playing 1 Sakuretsu Armor just to be able to attack, prevent my opponent from being able to just get free attacks in. When your opponent declares an attack, you target that monster and destroy it. So guys, that is going to be it for the deck profile. Thank you so much. If you managed to stick around, you are an absolute real one. And let me know if this is something that you are interested in. If you are interested in seeing other GOAT decks, I have made other GOAT decks, and would be willing to show those off as well. And if you're fans of content like this, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, GG.